"Judge, my daddy didn't kidnap me, I kidnapped him." And when a trembling 6-year-old shouted those words in court, the room froze, because what she revealed next shattered every adult's heart. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun filtered through the tall courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. The room buzzed with whispers and the rustle of papers as Ethan Reynolds stood at the defendant's table, his weathered hands gripping its edge. His military posture couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes or the worry lines etched deeply across his forehead. Judge Harrison peered down from his bench, his presence commanding immediate attention. The gavel struck once, twice, 3 times. "Order in the court!" The sharp sound echoed through the packed room, silencing the murmurs. Ethan's court-appointed lawyer, a young man fresh out of law school, shuffled his papers nervously. Across the aisle, the prosecutor, Miss Enide Parker, stood with practiced confidence, her crisp suit and perfectly styled hair, a stark contrast to Ethan's thrift store clothes. "Your Honor," Miss Parker began, her voice carrying easily through the hushed courtroom, "the facts are clear. Mr. Reynolds took his daughter from her legal foster placement without permission or proper documentation. This is a clear case of parental kidnapping." Lily sat in the front row, her small legs dangling from the wooden bench. She wore her best dress, a slightly faded blue cotton thing with tiny white flowers that Ethan had found at a second-hand store. Her dark curls were neatly braided, though a few stubborn strands had already escaped. "Furthermore," Miss Parker continued, gesturing dramatically, "Mr. Reynolds has shown a pattern of unstable behavior. He has no permanent residence, works multiple minimum-wage jobs, and cannot provide the stability this child needs." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. His eyes kept drifting to Lily, who squirmed uncomfortably in her seat under the social worker's watchful eye. His lawyer stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, my client, he's not bad." Lily's voice cut through the formal atmosphere like a thunderclap. She jumped to her feet, her small face flushed with emotion. "Judge, my daddy didn't kidnap me. I kidnapped him." The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. A reporter's pen clattered to the floor. Judge Harrison's eyebrows shot up, and even the stern-faced bailiff couldn't suppress a look of surprise. "Young lady," the judge began, but Lily wasn't finished. "I ran away from Mrs. Peterson's house because she forgot about me all the time," Lily continued, words tumbling out in a rush. "I had Mommy's old picture of Daddy, and I asked everyone until I found him. He didn't want to keep me at first. He said we had to call the police. But I cried and cried." Her bottom lip trembled. "I said I'd run away again if they took me back." Ethan moved without thinking, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides. He knelt beside his daughter, his calloused hands gentle as they rested on her small shoulders. "Lily, honey," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "It's true, Daddy," she insisted, turning to face him. Tears sparkled in her big brown eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong. You made me eat vegetables and go to bed on time and do my homework." She threw her arms around his neck. "You're the only one who didn't forget about me." The social worker half rose from her seat, but Judge Harrison held up his hand, stopping her. The older man's stern expression had softened almost imperceptibly as he watched the scene unfold. Cameras flashed from the back of the courtroom as reporters documented the moment. Ethan could hear their pencils scratching frantically against notepads, but he focused only on his daughter, on the way she clung to him like he was her anchor in a storm. "Your Honor," Miss Parker tried to interject, but her voice had lost some of its earlier certainty. "Please, please, don't take my daddy away," Lily pleaded, her face still buried in Ethan's shoulder. Her small body shook with sobs. "He reads me stories every night, even when he's really tired from work. He never forgets my medicine or my favorite cereal. He braided my hair for school all by himself. He learned from watching videos." Ethan stroked her back gently, fighting back his own tears. The courtroom had grown so quiet you could hear the old clock ticking on the wall. Even Miss Savant Parker seemed affected by the child's raw emotion, her earlier aggressive stance softening. More flashes came from the press section. Tomorrow's headlines were practically writing themselves: "Child claims she kidnapped father," or "6-year-old's shocking courtroom declaration." Judge Harrison leaned forward in his chair, his eyes moving from father to daughter and back again. The lines around his mouth had softened, though he maintained his professional demeanor. "Order," he called out, but his voice was gentler than before. The gavel tapped once, barely a tap compared to its earlier authority. Lily's grip on her father tightened at the sound. She turned her tear-stained face toward the judge, her chin quivering but determined. The sight of this small, brave child defending her father with such fierce loyalty had transformed the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. The morning sun had shifted, creating a warm patch of light where father and daughter stood embraced. Dust motes danced in the beam, giving the scene an almost ethereal quality. The stark, fluorescent courthouse lights seemed to dim in comparison to this natural spotlight on their reunion. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "Mr. Reynolds," he began, his tone markedly different from the stern authority he'd shown earlier. He looked at the trembling child clinging to her father, at the protective way Ethan held her, at the obvious love between them. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for his next words. The only sound was the soft sniffling of a little girl who had just laid bare her heart in defense of the father she had chosen, and the gentle whispers of a man who had found his purpose in the love of a child who needed him. "Young lady?" Judge Harrison's voice softened as he addressed Lily. "Would you please tell the court what you mean by that?" Ethan's court-appointed attorney leaned close, his breath warm against Ethan's ear. "Stay calm, Mr. Reynolds. Let her speak." Lily's small Mary Jane shoes barely touched the floor from her seat at the witness stand. Her dark curls bounced as she sat up straighter, hands folded in her lap just like her social worker had taught her. The oversized bow in her hair seemed to droop with the weight of the moment. "Well," she began, her voice clear despite its tiny size, "I saw Daddy's picture in Mama's special box before she went to heaven." Lily's fingers twisted in the fabric of her best Sunday dress, the one Ethan had carefully ironed that morning. "Mama told me that's my daddy, and she wrote his name on the back. She said he was a brave soldier." Attorney Paul Hensley, representing the state, stood up sharply. "Your Honor, this is clearly rehearsed." "Sit down, counselor," Judge Harrison commanded, his eyes never leaving Lily. "Continue, young lady." Ethan's throat tightened as he watched his daughter. He remembered that photo, taken before everything went wrong, before the false accusations, before his world collapsed. He'd been in his dress uniform, standing proud. "The foster home wasn't nice," Lily continued, her bottom lip quivering slightly. "Mrs. Weber never hugged me or read me stories. She had too many kids to take care of." She straightened her shoulders, showing a glimpse of the same determination Ethan often saw in the mirror. "So, I looked at the phone book in the kitchen when she wasn't looking. I found Daddy's name and address." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Harrison raised his eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. "I packed my backpack with Mr. Stuffles and my favorite hair bow." Lily's voice grew stronger. "I waited until after bedtime and climbed out the window. The bus station was only 2 blocks away, and I remembered how to get there from school." Ethan's hands clenched under the table. His heart ached, thinking of his little girl, alone on those dangerous streets at night. The attorney's steadying hand on his arm reminded him to keep his composure. "The nice lady at the bus station helped me count my piggy bank money for a ticket." Lily's face brightened with pride. "I saved it from the tooth fairy and my birthday." More whispers filled the courtroom. Judge Harrison tapped his gavel once, gently. "When I found Daddy's house, he was so surprised," Lily continued. "He tried to call Mrs. Weber right away, but I cried and begged him not to send me back." Her voice cracked slightly. "I showed him Mama's picture and told him I'd run away again if he made me leave. I said I'd keep running away until I could stay with him." Ethan remembered that night vividly, the tiny figure on his doorstep, clutching a worn photograph, her eyes full of desperate hope. He'd recognized her immediately. She had her mother's eyes. "Daddy made me hot chocolate and called lots of people the next morning," Lily said earnestly. "He wasn't trying to steal me. I stole him." She pointed at her father, her face serious. "He's mine now. I found him fair and square." A few chuckles broke through the tension in the courtroom. Even Paul Hensley's stern expression cracked slightly. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his weathered face gentle. "Miss Reynolds, do you feel safe with your father?" "Oh, yes." Lily's whole face lit up. "Daddy reads me stories every night, even when he's super tired from work. He makes sure I eat vegetables and brush my teeth. He braids my hair every morning, and he's getting better at it too." She held up her slightly uneven pigtails as evidence. "He never yells, not even when I spilled juice on the carpet. He just helped me clean it up." The gallery's mood had shifted notably. Where there had been suspicion, now Ethan could feel waves of sympathy. Several people dabbed at their eyes. A grandmother in the back row nodded approvingly. Judge Harrison sat back, removing his glasses and polishing them thoughtfully. The silence in the courtroom felt heavy with anticipation. Given the unusual circumstances of this case, the judge finally spoke, and the obvious bond between father and daughter, I am inclined to grant temporary custody to Mr. Reynolds, under supervision. He raised his hand as Paul Hensley began to object. "This arrangement will be subject to regular review and home visits from Child Protective Services." Relief flooded through Ethan's body. His attorney patted his shoulder with a slight smile. "However," Judge Harrison continued, fixing Ethan with a stern look, "any violation of these terms will result in immediate removal of the child. Do you understand, Mr. Reynolds?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you, Your Honor. Court officers will escort you and your daughter out." The judge banged his gavel. "We're adjourned until further notice." Lily scrambled down from the witness stand and ran to her father. Ethan caught her in his arms, holding her close as if she might disappear. Her small arms wrapped around his neck, and he could feel her heart beating against his chest. Two deputies approached, their faces professionally neutral, but their eyes kind. "This way, Mr. Reynolds." Ethan stood, keeping Lily's small hand firmly in his. As they walked toward the courthouse doors, he could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on them, hear the shuffle of reporters gathering their things, but none of it mattered. His daughter's hand was warm in his, and for now, that was enough. Camera flashes burst like lightning as Ethan and Lily emerged from the courthouse doors. The November wind whipped around them, carrying dried leaves across the weathered stone steps. Reporters pressed forward, their microphones thrust like weapons, voices overlapping in a desperate chorus. "Mr. Reynolds, how do you respond to the allegations? What do you say about your criminal record? Is it true that you—" Ethan's worn leather jacket came off his shoulders in one smooth motion. He wrapped it around Lily, pulling her close against his side. The jacket dwarfed her small frame, but it blocked the harsh camera flashes. The leather still held warmth from his body. "No questions," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "Please, my daughter's been through enough today." Lily's fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt as they made their way down the courthouse steps. Her other hand clutched Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed cat she'd carried with her from foster home to foster home. The toy's gray fur was matted and worn thin in spots, but Lily treated it like a precious treasure. They walked 3 blocks to where Ethan's old pickup truck sat waiting. The blue paint was chipped and rust crept along the wheel wells, but the engine was solid. He'd learned to maintain it during his service years. Ethan lifted Lily into the passenger seat, carefully buckling her in. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. Lily nodded, hugging Mr. Whiskers closer. "Can we go home now, Daddy?" Home. The word hit him like a punch to the chest. He hadn't heard her call any place home since this all began. The truck's engine coughed to life, and they drove through familiar streets to the small apartment complex on the edge of town. Paint peeled from the wooden siding, and the stairway creaked under their feet as they climbed to the second floor. But it was clean, and the rent was within what Ethan could afford on his maintenance worker's salary. He unlocked the door to apartment 2B, flicking on the lights. The space was small, just one main room with a tiny kitchen alcove, plus a bathroom. A fold-out couch took up most of the living area. The wallpaper, a faded pattern of yellow flowers, curled at the corners, despite Ethan's attempts to stick it back down. The ancient heater in the corner rattled to life, pushing warm air that smelled faintly of dust into the room. Lily spun in a circle, taking it all in with wide eyes. "It's perfect, Daddy," she declared, bouncing on her toes. "Can I put Mr. Whiskers on the windowsill? He likes to watch the birds." "Of course you can, baby." Ethan's throat felt tight as he watched her carefully arrange her stuffed cat by the window. She treated this shabby apartment like it was a palace, and his heart ached with love and worry. "Are you hungry?" he asked, opening the nearly empty refrigerator. "I could make us some pancakes for dinner." "Really?" Lily's face lit up. "With shapes?" "You bet. Animal shapes, just like you, like them." He pulled out the last of the milk and eggs, along with the pancake mix he'd gotten with his food stamps. There wasn't much left in the kitchen, but he'd figure something out tomorrow. Tonight was for celebrating. Lily pulled her step stool, really, just an overturned milk crate, up to the counter to help. She wore an expression of intense concentration as she helped measure ingredients, her tongue poking out slightly between her teeth. Flour dusted her nose and cheeks. "Daddy?" she asked, as he poured batter into the shape of what he hoped looked like an elephant. "Can you tell me a story while we cook? What kind of story would you like? Tell me about when you were a soldier. The good parts, not the sad parts." Ethan flipped the pancake carefully. "Well, there was this one time when we rescued a mother cat and her kittens who were living in our base. They ate their pancakes at the small folding table," Lily giggling as Ethan made voices for each animal-shaped pancake before she ate it. Outside, the sky darkened to purple, then black. Street lights flickered on, casting warm pools of light on the sidewalk below. After dinner, Ethan helped Lily wash up and change into her pajamas, the ones with little stars all over them that he'd found at the second-hand store. He pulled out the couch bed, which creaked in protest, and made it up with fresh sheets. "Story time?" Lily asked hopefully, already curled up under the blankets with Mr. Whiskers. "One short one," Ethan agreed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Then sleep, okay?" He was halfway through Goodnight Moon when Lily's small hand found his. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "Don't let them take me away again." The words hit him like physical blows. He squeezed her hand gently, watching as her eyes grew heavy despite her obvious fight against sleep. "I'm right here, baby," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Soon her breathing evened out, her face peaceful in sleep. Ethan remained sitting on the edge of the bed, his daughter's small hand still in his. The street light outside cast shadows across her face, making her look even younger than her 6 years. He bowed his head, words of prayer forming silently on his lips. "Please, God," he thought, "don't let them take her. Help me be the father she needs. Help me make this right." The heater rattled in the corner. Cars passed on the street below. And Ethan kept his vigil, guarding his daughter's dreams, afraid to close his eyes, lest this all prove to be a dream itself. The morning sun cast long shadows across the elementary school's brick walls as Ethan walked Lily up the path. His shoulders tensed at the sight of 2 news vans parked across the street, cameras already trained on them. Lily's small hand squeezed his larger one, her pink backpack bouncing with each step. "Remember what we talked about at breakfast?" Ethan asked softly, keeping his eyes forward. "Don't talk to reporters. Stay close to my teacher, and be brave," Lily recited. She looked up at him with a bright smile that made his heart ache. "Just like you, Daddy." The school's front door opened, and a woman in her mid-30s stepped out. She wore a navy blazer and carried a leather portfolio, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her warm brown eyes met Ethan's as she approached. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Grace Martinez, the social worker assigned to your case." She extended her hand, her grip firm but gentle. "And you must be Lily." Lily gave a small wave, but pressed closer to Ethan's side. The bell rang, echoing across the schoolyard. "Miss Thompson is waiting for you in room 12, Grace told Lily. "Would you like me to walk you there?" Lily shook her head and hugged Ethan's legs tight. "Can Daddy take me?" "Of course," Grace nodded. "Mr. Reynolds, we can talk after?" The classroom was bright, with children's artwork and educational posters. Miss Thompson, a young teacher with kind eyes, welcomed Lily warmly. "We saved you a spot right up front," she said, pointing to an empty desk decorated with a welcome sign. Ethan knelt down to Lily's level. "Have a great day, sweetheart. I'll be right here when school lets out. Promise?" Lily's lower lip trembled slightly. "Cross my heart." He made an X over his chest, earning a giggle from her. After one more quick hug, Lily joined her classmates. Ethan lingered by the door, watching through the window as she settled into her desk. Grace touched his elbow gently. "Let's talk in the conference room," she suggested. The small room felt cramped with just the two of them. Ethan's knees bumped against the table as he sat down. Grace opened her portfolio and pulled out several papers. "Mr. Reynolds, I want to be direct with you," she began. "Your case is complicated. The district attorney's office has pulled your military records, including the incident from 1998. Ethan's jaw tightened. The fluorescent light suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh. "That was a long time ago, I know, but they're going to use it against you." Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "I need to understand what happened so I can help." The memories crashed over him like a wave. The hot Afghan Sunday, the supply convoy, the missing equipment that someone had stolen, and the immediate fingers pointed at him, the only black sergeant in his unit. "I was framed," Ethan said, his voice rough. "Someone was stealing supplies, selling them on the black market. When it was discovered, my commanding officer, Lieutenant Collins, decided I was an easy target." His fingers drummed against the table. "No evidence, just his word against mine. And guess whose word carried more weight?" Grace made notes, her pen scratching quietly against paper. "The charges were assault? He claimed I attacked him when he confronted me about the theft." Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Truth is, he cornered me in the barracks, tried to provoke me into throwing the first punch. When I wouldn't, he did it himself. Then had two of his buddies back up his story." "Did you fight the charges?" "My appointed lawyer told me to take the plea deal. Said it was that or risk worse charges." Ethan rubbed his face with his hands. 6 months in the brig, dishonorable discharge. Lost my benefits, my pension. Been trying to rebuild ever since." Grace set down her pen. "Mr. Reynolds, Ethan, I believe you. But the court will need more than your word. Do you have anyone from your unit who might speak up now, after 20 years? He shook his head. "Most of them bought the lies. The few who knew the truth. We lost touch after I got out." "What about Lieutenant Collins? Last I heard he made colonel, retired with full honors." The injustice of it still burned, even after all these years. Grace leaned forward. "Listen to me. This isn't just about clearing your name anymore. It's about Lily. The prosecution will argue that your record shows a pattern of violence." "I've never been violent." Ethan's voice rose sharply. He immediately lowered it, conscious of the classes in session nearby. "I've worked honest jobs, paid my taxes, lived clean. But none of that matters, does it? They look at my record, my skin, my empty bank account, and they've already decided what kind of man I am." "I haven't," Grace said firmly. "And neither has that little girl in there who loves you more than anything." She gathered her papers. "I'm going to fight for you, Mr. Reynolds. But you need to be prepared. This won't be easy." Ethan stood and walked to the classroom window. Through the glass, he could see Lily at her desk, her face scrunched in concentration as she worked on something. A crayon moved carefully in her small hand, and she smiled at whatever she was creating. "Look at her," he said softly. "All those foster homes, losing her mother, everything she's been through, and she still smiles like that." His palm pressed against the cool glass. "I can't lose her, Miss Martinez. I won't." "Then let's make sure you don't," Grace replied. "I'll start digging into your old case. Maybe we can find someone willing to speak up after all these years. In the meantime, focus on being the father she needs." Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving Lily. She looked up then, somehow sensing his presence. Her whole face lit up as she waved enthusiastically. He waved back, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "I missed the first 6 years of her life," he said. "I won't miss another day, not one." The small TV in Ethan's apartment crackled with static as he stirred the pot of tomato soup on the worn stove. He'd found the dented can in the back of his cupboard, stretching it with water to make enough for two. The news anchor's voice cut through the quiet evening like a knife. Breaking news tonight. More details emerge about Ethan Reynolds, the father accused of kidnapping his own daughter. Sources reveal a troubling criminal record. Ethan's hand trembled on the wooden spoon. He glanced at Lily, who sat at their rickety kitchen table, her legs swinging as she colored with the few crayons they owned. "Should I turn it off, sweetheart?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lily shook her head, too focused on her drawing to notice the worry lines creasing her father's forehead. "I like the background noise," she said simply. The reporter continued, her perfectly styled hair and crisp blazer a stark contrast to their humble surroundings. Reynolds, a veteran with a history of violence during his service years, was previously convicted of— Ethan's soup spoon clattered against the pot. "That's not true," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The old familiar ache rose in his chest, the same pain he'd felt years ago when false accusations had stripped him of his dignity. Through the thin walls, he heard Mrs. Peterson next door turn up her television volume. His neighbors were listening, forming opinions, passing judgment. "Dinner's ready," Ethan announced, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. He poured the soup into their mismatched bowls. Lily's with cartoon characters, his a plain ceramic one from the dollar store. "Thank you, Daddy," Lily beamed, carefully setting aside her crayons. Her smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Through the peephole, Ethan saw camera lights and microphones. "Mr. Reynolds, can you respond to allegations about your violent past?" He turned down the TV volume and whispered to Lily, "Just ignore them, sweetie. Let's have our dinner." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the sounds of reporters and curious neighbors murmuring outside their door. Lily blew on each spoonful carefully, just like he'd taught her. "These people are silly," she declared suddenly, making Ethan look up from his bowl. "They don't know you're the nicest daddy in the whole world." Ethan's throat tightened. "Some people, they think they know things about me that aren't true." "Like when Tommy at school said I stole his pencil but I didn't?" Lily asked, her face serious. "Something like that." Ethan managed a small smile. "Sometimes people make wrong judgments about others." More voices joined the commotion outside. Someone was arguing in the hallway, probably Mrs. Peterson telling the reporters to leave. Through the thin walls, Ethan could hear snippets of conversation. "Dangerous man. Poor little girl. Shouldn't be allowed." Lily pushed her empty bowl aside and returned to her drawing, her small face scrunched in concentration. Ethan watched her work, marveling at how she seemed unaffected by the chaos around them. Her innocence was a gift he desperately wanted to protect. "Done," she announced proudly, holding up her artwork. "It's us." Ethan's heart swelled as he looked at the crayon drawing. Two stick figures stood hand in hand, one tall with dark curly hair like his, one small with pigtails like Lily's. Above them, a bright yellow sun smiled down, and at the bottom, in wobbly letters, she'd written, "Forever." "See?" Lily explained, pointing to their joined hands. "We're holding hands because we're going to be together forever. And I made the sun happy because he knows it too." Ethan blinked back tears as he took the drawing. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. The most beautiful picture I've ever seen. We can put it on the fridge." Lily jumped up excitedly. "Then everyone can see it." Ethan found an old magnet and carefully placed the drawing on their refrigerator door. The bright colors stood out against the scratched white surface, making their tiny kitchen feel warmer somehow. Lily stood back to admire her work, hands on her hips. "Perfect," she declared. Another knock at the door made Ethan tense, but this one was different. 3 soft taps. "Mr. Reynolds?" It was Mrs. Martinez, the social worker. "I've cleared the reporters away. Just checking if you need anything." "We're okay," he called back, grateful for her intervention. "Thank you." When her footsteps faded, Ethan looked at the drawing again. His daughter's simple art spoke volumes. 2 figures, connected, permanent, forever. Despite the voices outside, despite the news reports and suspicious neighbors, despite his past threatening to overshadow his present, this moment felt real and true. The TV still droned in the background, but now it was just noise. Here in their small kitchen, with Lily's artwork brightening their fridge and his daughter's unwavering faith in him, Ethan felt a spark of hope. It was small, like a candle flame in the dark, but it was enough to light the way forward. "Daddy," Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Can we make hot chocolate? We'll have to use water instead of milk," he warned, knowing their limitations. "That's okay," she chirped. "Your hot chocolate is the best anyway." As Ethan reached for their last packet of cocoa mix, he caught another glimpse of the drawing. Forever, it promised in a child's handwriting. Maybe, just maybe, they could make that promise come true. The morning sun filtered through the threadbare curtains of Ethan's small apartment. He stood at the kitchen counter, carefully cutting a peanut butter sandwich into triangles for Lily's lunch. The bread was slightly stale, but he'd hidden that by toasting it. "Daddy, can I have apple slices too?" Lily asked from where she sat at their wobbly kitchen table, still in her favorite unicorn pajamas. "Sure can, Princess." Ethan smiled, grateful he still had one apple left. He'd been stretching their food until his next paycheck. A sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Ethan wasn't expecting anyone, and Grace Martinez, their social worker, always called first. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Stay here, sweetheart," Ethan said quietly, moving toward the door. When he opened it, he found himself face to face with an elegant couple in their 60s. The woman wore a pearl necklace that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The man's tailored suit spoke of old money and country clubs. "Mr. Reynolds," the man said, his voice clipped and formal. "I'm Richard Harrison, and this is my wife Margaret. We're Lily's grandparents." Ethan's heart dropped to his stomach. He'd never met Sarah's parents. They'd disowned her when she'd married him. Now here they stood, looking at him like something stuck to the bottom of their expensive shoes. "What do you want?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice level despite the anxiety churning in his gut. "To see our granddaughter," Margaret replied, her eyes darting past him to scan the apartment's shabby interior. Her nose wrinkled at the peeling wallpaper and the water stain in the corner of the ceiling. "Grandma? Grandpa?" Lily's small voice came from behind Ethan. He turned to find her standing there, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit. Margaret's face softened for a moment. "Oh, look at you. You're the spitting image of your mother." "May we come in?" Richard asked, though it sounded more like a demand than a question. Ethan stepped aside, his jaw tight. He watched as they entered, their expensive shoes clicking against the scuffed linoleum floor. They looked completely out of place in his humble apartment, like peacocks in a chicken coop. "We'll be direct, Mr. Reynolds," Richard said, remaining standing while Margaret perched on the edge of their second-hand couch. "We're filing for custody of Lily." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "You're what?" "Look around." Margaret gestured at the apartment. "This is no place for a child. That mattress on the floor, these conditions. Sarah would be horrified." Ethan's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Sarah knew I'd take care of our daughter. By letting her sleep on a couch while you take the floor?" Richard scoffed. "We can give her a proper bedroom, private school, dance lessons, everything Sarah would have wanted for her." "What Sarah wanted," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion, "was for her daughter to be loved. That's something you wouldn't understand, considering how you treated her when she married me." Lily moved closer to Ethan, wrapping her small arms around his leg. The gesture wasn't lost on Margaret, whose lips thinned into a hard line. "We've already spoken with our attorneys," Richard continued. "Your criminal record, your financial situation, no judge will choose this over the stability we can provide." "You can't take me away," Lily suddenly burst out, her voice trembling. "I want to stay with Daddy." Margaret stood, smoothing her expensive skirt. "Darling, you don't understand. We can give you everything you've ever wanted. A beautiful room, new clothes, toys." "I don't want those things." Lily pressed her face against Ethan's leg, her small shoulders shaking. Ethan placed a protective hand on her head, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I think you should leave. Our lawyers will be in touch," Richard said, pulling a business card from his pocket and placing it on the scratched coffee table. "Do the right thing, Mr. Reynolds. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." They showed themselves out, the door closing behind them with a quiet click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, Lily still clinging to his leg, before his knees gave out and he sank into the nearest chair. The morning sun continued to stream through the window, but it felt colder now. Lily climbed into his lap, her face wet with tears. "They can't take me away, can they, Daddy?" Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as his world seemed to crumble around him. The business card on the coffee table caught the sunlight, the expensive cardstock gleaming like a threat. The Harrison name was embossed in gold letters, representing everything he couldn't give his daughter: wealth, privilege, status. He stared at that card, his throat tight with unshed tears, realizing that the custody hearing had been just the beginning. The real battle, against money, influence, and social prejudice, was only now starting. The bell above Joe's diner chimed as Ethan pushed open the heavy glass door, guiding Lily inside with a gentle hand on her shoulder. The familiar scent of coffee and maple syrup wrapped around them like a warm blanket. A few early morning regulars looked up from their newspapers, then quickly looked away when they recognized him from the news. "Over there," Lily pointed, spotting Grace Martinez already seated in a red vinyl booth by the window. The social worker's professional attire stood out among the work clothes and casual wear of the other customers. "Good morning." Grace smiled warmly, standing to greet them. Her dark eyes held genuine kindness that made some of the tension ease from Ethan's shoulders. "I ordered coffee for you, Ethan, and hot chocolate for Miss Lily." "Thank you, Miss Grace." Lily bounced onto the bench seat, her small legs swinging beneath the table. Ethan slid in beside his daughter, noting how the other diners whispered behind their menus. He'd gotten used to the stares and mutters over the past few days, but it still stung. "I took the liberty of ordering the chocolate chip pancakes, too," Grace said, winking at Lily. "A little bird told me they're your favorite." "With extra chips?" Lily asked hopefully. "Double extra," Grace confirmed, making the little girl beam. The waitress brought their drinks, setting them down without making eye contact. Ethan wrapped his calloused hands around the warm coffee mug, drawing strength from its heat. "So," Grace began, her tone shifting to gentle business, "we need to talk strategy, Ethan. The grandparents' petition for custody is serious. They have money, influence, and a team of expensive lawyers." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What they don't have is love for Lily. They never even visited her in foster care." "I know," Grace said softly. "But the court will look at practical matters. Income, stability, your history. We need to build a strong case showing you're the best choice for Lily's well-being." The pancakes arrived, steam rising from the towering stack. Lily dove in eagerly, chocolate smearing her cheeks. Ethan absently handed her a napkin, his mind churning with worry. "Character witnesses," Grace continued. "People who can testify to your integrity, your dedication as a father. Do you have anyone who might speak on your behalf?" Ethan stared into his coffee. "I keep to myself mostly. Work long hours at the warehouse. Church on Sundays when I can make it." "The church?" Grace straightened. "That's perfect. How long have you attended?" "Few years now. Pastor Samuel's been real good to me, especially after." Ethan glanced at Lily, happily absorbed in her breakfast. "After everything that happened during my service years." Grace leaned forward. "A pastor's testimony would carry significant weight. Anyone else? Other veterans, maybe?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "My old unit brothers. We still meet up sometimes at the VFW hall. They know the truth about those false charges. Were there when it happened. But they're rough around the edges. Not sure they'd make the best impression in court." "Sometimes rough edges make the most authentic witnesses," Grace said. "The judge needs to see real people who know your character, not polished performances." Lily looked up from her decimated pancakes. "Uncle Mike and Uncle Tommy are the best. They always bring me candy and tell funny stories." A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. His veteran brothers had taken to Lily immediately, their gruff exteriors melting around her innocent charm. See? Grace gestured to Lily. They clearly care about both of you. Will you at least ask them? Ethan nodded slowly. I'll stop by the hall after work today and talk to Pastor Samuel at Wednesday night service. Good. Grace pulled out her phone, checking the time. I should head to the office. But Ethan? She waited until he met her eyes. You're not alone in this fight. Remember that. As Grace gathered her things, Lily tugged Ethan's sleeve. Daddy, can I give Miss Grace my drawing? Of course, sweetheart. Lily pulled a folded paper from her backpack, proudly presenting it to Grace. It showed 3 stick figures, a tall one labeled Daddy, a small one labeled Me, and a medium one, wearing what appeared to be a business suit labeled Nice Lady. Grace's eyes softened as she carefully tucked the drawing into her briefcase. Thank you, Lily. I'll hang it right on my office wall. After Grace left, Ethan helped Lily clean the sticky syrup from her hands and face. The other customers had mostly cleared out, leaving them in relative peace. Ready for school, kiddo? He asked, pulling out his worn wallet to pay the bill. Uh-huh. Lily gathered her backpack. Daddy, are Uncle Mike and Uncle Tommy going to help us stay together? Ethan knelt down, straightening her jacket zipper. They're going to try their best, just like Miss Grace and Pastor Samuel and lots of other people who care about us. Good. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. Because I'm not letting anyone take you away. You're my daddy forever. Ethan held her close, breathing in the sweet scent of syrup and childhood innocence. For the first time since the grandparents' visit, he felt a flutter of hope in his chest. He wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Standing up, he took Lily's small hand in his. Together they walked out of the diner into the crisp morning air, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Grace Martinez stood outside the weathered brick building of the Veterans Community Center, her warm smile welcoming Ethan and Lily as they pulled up in his old pickup truck. The morning sun caught the peeling paint of the sign above the entrance, but there was something inviting about the place despite its worn appearance. I promise you'll both love it here, Grace said, watching Ethan's hesitation as he helped Lily out of the truck. The veterans here are like family. Ethan's shoulders tensed. Been a while since I've been around my brothers, he admitted, his voice quiet. Lily squeezed his hand, looking up at him with those big trusting eyes that always seemed to melt his worries away. Inside, the center buzzed with activity. Veterans of all ages gathered around tables playing cards, while others worked on craft projects or chatted over coffee. The walls were covered with service photos and American flags, creating a familiar atmosphere that made Ethan's chest tighten with memories. Reynolds? Is that you? A booming voice called out. An older man with silver hair and kind eyes approached them, walking with a slight limp. Mike Thompson. Remember me from the 82nd? Recognition flickered across Ethan's face. Sergeant Thompson? Just Mike now, son. The older veteran's eyes crinkled as he smiled down at Lily. And who's this beautiful young lady? I'm Lily, she announced proudly, doing a little curtsy that made everyone nearby chuckle. Are you one of Daddy's army friends? Sure am, sweetheart. Mike's expression softened. Your daddy was one of the bravest men I ever served with. More veterans gathered around, drawn by the conversation. Some Ethan recognized, others he didn't, but they all greeted him like a long-lost brother. The warmth in their voices, the understanding in their eyes, it was something Ethan hadn't realized he'd been missing. Hey, the kids' choir is about to start practice, a woman called out from across the room. Would your little one like to join in? Lily's face lit up. Can I, Daddy? Please? Ethan nodded, watching as his daughter skipped off to join a small group of children gathering near an old upright piano. The choir director, a retired music teacher with silver hair and gentle hands, welcomed Lily with open arms. She's got spirit, Grace observed, standing beside Ethan as they watched Lily take her place among the other children. The piano keys struck up a familiar tune, and soon the room filled with young voices singing America the Beautiful. Lily's clear, sweet voice rose above the others, her face glowing with joy. Veterans stopped their activities to listen, some wiping away tears as the children sang. Remember when we used to sing that overseas? Mike asked quietly, standing on Ethan's other side. Kept us going through the rough times. Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Watching Lily sing, seeing her so happy and free, made everything else fade away. The custody battle, the media circus, the judgmental stares from strangers. After choir practice, Lily joined a group of children playing board games, while Ethan sat with his old combat buddies. They shared stories, careful to keep the darker memories at bay, and caught up on each other's lives. No one mentioned his legal troubles or asked about the accusations. They just accepted him, the way only brothers in arms could. "We've got your back, Reynolds," Mike said firmly, clasping Ethan's shoulder. "Whatever you need. Character witnesses, support in court, anything." "That's right," another veteran chimed in. "We take care of our own." Grace, who had been quietly observing, smiled knowingly. This was exactly what she'd hoped would happen. Ethan, finding his support system again. Lily discovering a community that would embrace them both. The afternoon passed quickly. Lily moved from activity to activity, charming everyone she met. She helped an elderly veteran with his puzzle, listened intently to war stories, the kid-friendly versions, and even learned to play checkers from a retired Marine. "Daddy," she called out periodically, running over to share her latest adventure before darting back to her new friends. Each time, Ethan's heart swelled with pride and love. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the center's windows, Ethan knew it was time to head home. Lily protested, but her yawns gave away her exhaustion. "Can we come back tomorrow?" she asked sleepily, as Ethan buckled her into her car seat. "Soon, baby girl," he promised, tucking her worn teddy bear under her arm. Grace touched his arm gently before he got into the driver's seat. "You see, you're not alone in this fight, Ethan." He nodded, gratitude filling his chest. "Thank you, Grace, for everything." The drive home was quiet, with Lily quickly falling asleep in the back seat. Ethan glanced at her in the rear-view mirror, her face peaceful in the glow of passing streetlights. Her small hand still clutched the drawing she'd made at the center. A picture of herself surrounded by smiling veterans, with "My New Family" written in crooked letters across the top. "We'll be okay, baby girl," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, he actually believed it. Sunlight streamed through the small kitchen window of Ethan's apartment, catching dust motes dancing in the air. The old clock on the wall ticked past 7 as Ethan pulled out a mixing bowl from the cupboard. Lily stood on a wooden chair beside him, her pink pajamas dotted with unicorns, her dark curls still messy from sleep. "Can I crack the eggs, Daddy?" Lily asked, bouncing on her tiptoes. "Sure thing, sweetheart." Ethan handed her an egg, his large hands gentle as they guided her smaller ones. "Remember, tap it softly against the crack." The egg split too hard, sending shell pieces and yolk dripping onto the counter. "Oops," Lily giggled, her brown eyes wide. "That's okay," Ethan chuckled, reaching for a paper towel. "Practice makes perfect. Want to try again?" The second egg went better, landing mostly in the bowl. Lily beamed with pride as Ethan showed her how to fish out the tiny bits of shell with a spoon. Together, they measured flour for pancakes, though Lily's enthusiastic stirring sent white clouds puffing into the air. "Look, Daddy," she squealed, pointing at his nose covered in flour. "You're like a snowman." Ethan crossed his eyes to look at his nose, making Lily collapse into giggles. He couldn't help but join in, his deep laugh mixing with her bell-like sounds. Soon they were both covered in flour, their sides aching from laughter. "Your hair's all white." Lily reached up to pat his head, leaving tiny handprints in the flour. "Oh yeah?" Ethan gently dabbed her nose with a floury finger. "Look who's talking, little ghost." They managed to finish the pancakes between fits of giggles, though they were slightly misshapen. Lily declared them the most perfectest pancakes ever as she drizzled syrup in careful circles. After breakfast and a thorough cleanup, Ethan helped Lily change into play clothes, her favorite yellow dress and sneakers. He packed a small bag with water bottles and snacks, grabbed an old baseball and mitt from his closet, and they headed to the local park. The morning air was crisp and sweet, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. Other families were already there, children racing around the playground, while parents watched from benches. Ethan felt some of their eyes on him, He'd grown used to the wary looks, but he focused on Lily's excited skipping beside him. "Ready to learn how to catch?" he asked, leading her to an open, grassy area. "Yes!" Lily jumped up and down. "I'm gonna be the best catcher ever!" Ethan showed her how to hold the mitt, his heart swelling as she stuck her tongue out in concentration. He started with gentle tosses, praising her efforts even when the ball rolled past. "Keep your eye on the ball, sweetie," he coached. "That's it, perfect." When she finally caught one, Lily's triumphant yell drew attention from nearby parents. "I did it, Daddy! Did you see?" "Sure did," Ethan clapped. "That was amazing." As they continued playing, Ethan noticed the tension around them slowly easing. A mother pushing her son on the swings offered a friendly wave. An elderly man walking his dog stopped to compliment Lily's catching skills. "You're a natural, young lady," the man said, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thank you," Lily replied. "My daddy's teaching me." The man nodded approvingly at Ethan. "You're doing a fine job, sir." They played until Lily's cheeks were flushed with exercise and joy. Other children gradually drifted over, asking to join their game. Soon Ethan found himself pitching to a small group, while parents watched with growing smiles instead of suspicion. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in warm oranges and pinks, families started heading home. Ethan packed up their things, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" "One more thing." Lily held up her arms. "Up, please." Ethan lifted her onto his shoulders, holding her legs securely as she settled. Lily spread her arms wide, her voice ringing with pure happiness across the park. "I love my daddy." The few remaining park-goers turned at her declaration, their faces softening into genuine smiles. A jogger paused to wave, and a young couple walking their dog beamed at the sight. Ethan's throat tightened with emotion as he held onto his daughter's legs, her small hands resting on top of his head. In that moment, with the setting sun warming their faces and Lily's joy echoing around them, everything felt right in their world. The evening had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Dishes from their simple dinner of mac and cheese clinked softly as Ethan washed them, while Lily sat at their small kitchen table, coloring with the few crayons she owned. The sound of her humming filled their tiny apartment with warmth. A sharp knock cut through the quiet. Ethan dried his hands on a worn dish towel, his heart skipping a beat. Through the peephole, he saw a man in a courier's uniform. Opening the door cautiously, he accepted a thick manila envelope. "Legal documents, sir. Need your signature here." Ethan's hands trembled as he signed. The courier left, and he shut the door, staring at the envelope like it might bite. In the kitchen, Lily's crayon strokes continued, blissfully unaware. He opened it carefully, pulling out official-looking papers stamped with the county court seal. As his eyes scanned the document, his throat tightened. The Harrises, Lily's grandparents, were pushing for an emergency hearing. They claimed his criminal record made him an immediate threat to Lily's well-being. "What's that, Daddy?" Lily asked, now standing beside him. Ethan quickly folded the papers. "Just some grown-up stuff, baby. Hey, why don't you show me what you're drawing?" But before Lily could answer, his phone buzzed. Grace's name flashed on the screen. "I just got word," Grace said when he answered. "Can I come over? We need to talk about this." 20 minutes later, Grace sat at their kitchen table. Lily had moved to the living room floor with her coloring books, still within sight but out of earshot. "The Harrises have hired Thompson and Associates," Grace explained quietly, her usual calm voice tight with concern. "They're one of the top family law firms in the state." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "How much does that matter?" "It matters." Grace clasped her hands together. "They're going to dig deep, Ethan. That old conviction, even though it was wrong, they'll use it. They'll bring up your financial situation, your housing." "But I'm her father," Ethan whispered fiercely, his eyes burning. "Doesn't that count for anything?" "Of course it does. But they're going to argue that love isn't enough. They'll show their big house, their resources, their connections." Grace leaned forward. "The Harrises can offer Lily private schools, music lessons, vacations. Things I can't give her," Ethan finished, his voice hollow. "Things that don't matter as much as a father's love," Grace corrected firmly. "But we need to be prepared. They're going to paint you as unstable, possibly dangerous. They'll twist that old conviction into something it wasn't. Ethan pushed back from the table, pacing the small kitchen. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, matching the static in his mind. Through the doorway, he could see Lily lying on her stomach, feet swaying in the air as she colored, completely at peace. "I work 2 jobs," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm trying to save for a better place. I make sure she always has food, even when I have to skip meals. Daddy?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her big brown eyes concerned. "Are you sad?" Before he could answer, she ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his legs. Ethan felt the tension in his body release slightly, just from her touch. He picked her up, holding her close, breathing in the sweet smell of her hair. "I'm okay, baby girl," he murmured. "Is it because of Grandma and Grandpa?" Lily asked, surprising both adults. "They were mean to you, I heard them." Grace watched as Ethan sat down, still holding Lily. "You noticed that, huh?" he asked softly. Lily nodded against his chest. "They said bad things about our home. But I love our home, and I love you." Ethan's eyes met Grace's over Lily's head. In that moment, he felt something steel itself inside him. The defeat that had been creeping in started to retreat. "Mrs. Martinez," Lily said suddenly, turning to Grace, "can you help my daddy? He's the best daddy in the whole world." Grace smiled, though her eyes were bright with tears. "That's exactly what I'm trying to do, sweetheart." After Grace left, Ethan went through their bedtime routine. He helped Lily brush her teeth, read her favorite story about a brave little bird, and tucked her into bed, really just a mattress on the floor of their small second room, but Lily had decorated it with paper stars she'd made at school. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was sleepy. "We're going to stay together, right?" Ethan knelt beside her bed, his heart aching. The court summons felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. The weight of the Harrises' wealth and influence, the shadow of his past, the mountain of obstacles ahead, it all pressed down on him. But looking at Lily's trusting face, he found his strength. He thought of her running away to find him, of her declaration in court, of her unwavering love despite their humble circumstances. She had fought to be with him. Now it was his turn to fight for her. "Listen to me, baby girl," he said, taking her small hand in his. "I promise you, I won't let them take you away. We're a team, remember?" Lily smiled sleepily. "The best team, that's right." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. The very best team. Kneeling there beside her bed, watching her drift off to sleep, Ethan silently renewed his promise. He would find a way to prove himself worthy. He would show the court, the Harrises, everyone, that a father's love was worth more than all the wealth in the world. That this tiny apartment, with its peeling wallpaper and squeaky floors, was filled with more love than any mansion could hold. The courtroom's polished wooden benches creaked under the weight of spectators. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly in his lap to hide their trembling. His worn suit jacket, borrowed from one of his veteran brothers, felt too tight around his shoulders. The grandparents' lawyer, Mr. Harrison, stood before the court in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. His perfectly polished shoes clicked against the floor as he paced. "Your Honor," Harrison's voice rang out, "Mr. Reynolds may have good intentions, but intentions aren't enough to raise a child." He gestured toward Ethan with a manicured hand. "This is a man with a violent criminal record who can barely keep a stable job. He lives in a rundown apartment in one of the poorest parts of town." Ethan's jaw clenched. He felt Grace Martinez, his social worker, squeeze his shoulder supportively from where she sat behind him. "Meanwhile," Harrison continued, "my clients can provide Lily with everything she needs: private schooling, dance lessons, a room of her own in their beautiful home. They can give her the life her mother would have wanted for her." Lily sat in the front row with a court-appointed guardian, her small face pinched with worry. She wore her best dress, a slightly faded purple one Ethan had found at a thrift store. When their eyes met, she gave him a brave little smile that nearly broke his heart. Pastor Samuel Clark was the first character witness called to the stand. The elderly minister's kind face showed determination as he spoke. "I've known Ethan Reynolds for 5 years," Pastor Clark testified, his voice steady and clear. "He comes to our food bank, not just to receive help, but to volunteer. Even when he had nothing, he gave his time to others. That's the kind of man he is, someone who thinks of others before himself." The pastor's words brought murmurs of approval from some in the gallery, but Harrison was quick to counter. "And in these 5 years, Pastor, did Mr. Reynolds ever hold a job for longer than 6 months?" The pastor's face fell slightly. "No, but no further questions." Next came James Cooper, one of Ethan's closest veteran friends. His prosthetic leg caught the light as he made his way to the witness stand. "Ethan Reynolds saved my life in combat," James declared, his voice gruff with emotion. "He's the most honorable man I know. That criminal record? It came from defending another soldier from racial harassment. He took the fall to protect his unit." The grandparent's lawyer pounced again. "Mr. Cooper, isn't it true that you yourself struggled with PTSD and substance abuse after returning home?" "Objection," Ethan's public defender called out. "Relevance? I'm establishing the credibility of the witness's judgment, Your Honor." "I'll allow it," the judge said. James's face reddened. "Yes, I did struggle. But Ethan was there for me. Thank you, that's all." Harrison cut him off smoothly. 2 more veterans testified to Ethan's character. But Harrison skillfully undermined each one, highlighting their own struggles and painting them as a troubled group of men unable to adjust to civilian life. When Lily's grandparents took the stand, they presented a picture of stability and wealth that made Ethan's stomach knot. Mrs. Eleanor Campbell, Lily's grandmother, dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief as she spoke. "We just want what's best for our granddaughter," she said. "We have a trust fund set up for her education. She'll have her own suite of rooms, a private tutor, horseback riding lessons, everything our daughter would have wanted for her little girl." Mr. Campbell nodded solemnly. "We can give her the future she deserves." The judge called Lily forward last. She looked tiny standing before his bench, but her chin was raised bravely. "Please, Your Honor," she said, her voice quavering but determined. "I want to stay with my daddy. He makes me feel safe, and he reads to me every night, and he never forgets to check under my bed for monsters." Her lower lip trembled. "The Campbell's house is big and fancy, but it's not home. Daddy is home." Tears slid down Ethan's cheeks as he listened to his daughter's words. The courtroom was silent except for a few sniffles from the gallery. The judge removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "This is a complex situation that requires careful consideration," he said finally. "Until a final decision can be reached, I am ordering temporary custody be granted to Mr. and Mrs. Campbell." "No!" Lily cried out, running to Ethan. He caught her in his arms as she sobbed. "Please, Daddy, don't let them take me." Ethan held her close, his heart shattering. "It's just temporary, baby girl," he whispered, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. "I promise I'll fix this. I promise." The bailiff stepped forward, and Mrs. Campbell rose to collect Lily. The little girl clung to Ethan's neck, her tears soaking his collar. "Time to go, sweetheart," Mrs. Campbell said, reaching for Lily's hand. "Daddy!" Lily's cry echoed through the courtroom as she was led away. Ethan stood frozen, his arms empty, watching his daughter disappear through the courtroom doors. The sound of her sobs faded, leaving behind a silence that seemed to mock everything he'd fought for. His legs gave out, and he sank heavily into his chair, the weight of failure crushing down on his shoulders. Grace's hand found his shoulder again, but he barely felt it. All he could feel was the phantom warmth of where Lily had been in his arms just moments before, and the cold certainty that he had let her down. Ethan stood in Lily's makeshift bedroom corner of his tiny apartment, holding her worn purple backpack. His hands trembled as he folded her favorite polka dot dress, the one she'd worn to church last Sunday. Lily sat curled up on the couch bed, her small shoulders shaking with sobs. "Please, Daddy," she whimpered, hugging her teddy bear tight. "I don't want to go. I'll be good, I promise." The words cut through Ethan's heart like a knife. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "Baby girl, it's just for a little while. I promise I'm fighting to get you back." "But I want to stay here." Lily's voice cracked. I don't care if their house is bigger. I like our home." Ethan zipped up the backpack and knelt beside her. Her cheeks were wet with tears, her brown eyes wide with fear. He gently wiped her face with his thumb, just like he used to do when she was a baby. "Listen to me, Lily Bug," he said softly, using his special nickname for her. "Sometimes life isn't fair, but no matter where you are, you're my daughter. Nothing will ever change that." A knock at the door made them both jump. Grace Martinez stood there, her kind face full of sympathy. "It's time," she said quietly. The drive to the grandparents' mansion felt endless. Ethan sat in the back seat with Lily, who hadn't let go of his hand since they left the apartment. Outside the car windows, their working-class neighborhood gave way to tree-lined streets and massive houses. The Reynolds estate loomed ahead, a sprawling 3-story home, with perfectly manicured lawns and a fountain in the circular driveway. Lily's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. Mrs. Reynolds opened the heavy wooden door before they reached it. She wore an expensive silk blouse and pearls, her silver hair perfectly styled. "Welcome home, dear," she said to Lily, completely ignoring Ethan. "This isn't home," Lily mumbled, pressing closer to her father's side. Inside, the marble foyer gleamed. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, and original paintings decorated the walls. Mr. Reynolds appeared from his study, wearing a tailored suit despite it being Sunday. "Your room is upstairs, Lily," he said. "The housekeeper has prepared it specially." Grace stepped forward, holding out some papers. "Here's the visitation schedule we discussed. Mr. Reynolds has the right to see Lily 3 times a week. Supervised visits only," Mrs. Reynolds added sharply, making Ethan's jaw clench. Lily's room was bigger than Ethan's entire apartment. A canopy bed with pink silk sheets dominated one wall, while a dollhouse taller than Lily stood in the corner. A white desk held a brand new laptop, and the walk-in closet was already filled with expensive clothes. "Look at all your new things," Mrs. Reynolds said proudly. "Much better than that awful little apartment." Lily burst into fresh tears, burying her face in Ethan's leg. He knelt down, pulling her into a tight hug. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo they'd bought on sale last week, and his throat tightened, knowing he wouldn't get to wash her hair tonight. "I love you more than anything in this world," he whispered in her ear. "Be brave for me, okay?" She nodded against his shoulder, hiccuping. "I love you too, Daddy." Grace touched his arm gently. "We need to go, Ethan." The walk back to the front door felt like a death march. Each of Lily's sobs echoed in the vast foyer. At the last moment, she broke free from her grandmother and ran back to Ethan, throwing her arms around his waist. "Please don't leave me," she cried. It took every ounce of strength Ethan possessed to peel her arms away. Mrs. Reynolds practically dragged Lily back, while Mr. Reynolds stood watching with cold satisfaction. "She'll adjust," he said dismissively. "Children always do." Grace drove Ethan home in silence. He stared out the window, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. The setting sun cast long shadows across the streets, making everything look as hollow as he felt. Back in his apartment, the silence was deafening. Lily's drawings covered the fridge, stick figures holding hands, hearts, and "I love you, Daddy," written in wobbly letters. Her half-empty juice cup sat on the kitchen counter. The teddy bear she'd forgotten in her distress lay face down on the couch. Ethan's legs gave out. He sank to his knees in the middle of the living room, his whole body shaking. "Please," he prayed, his voice raw. "Please don't let them take her from me forever. She's all I have." Tears he'd been holding back all day finally broke free. He cried for Lily, scared and alone in that huge house. He cried for himself, for the injustice of being judged by his past and his poverty rather than his love. He cried until his throat was sore and his eyes burned. The sound of paper sliding under his door made him look up. A plain white envelope lay on the floor, his name written in Grace's neat handwriting. Inside was a sheet of construction paper, covered in Lily's careful 6-year-old printing. Grace had clearly helped with the spelling, but the words were pure Lily. "Dear Daddy, I don't want riches, I don't want mansions, I want you. Because I kidnapped you, Daddy, you're mine. Grace says I have to be brave, but it's okay if you cry sometimes too." I drew hearts all around this letter. so you can feel my hugs. Love forever and ever, Lily. Little hearts bordered the entire page, just as she'd promised. Ethan pressed the letter to his chest, right over his aching heart, and let his daughter's love wash over him like a healing balm. Ethan sat at his scratched kitchen table, staring at the sealed envelope in his trembling hands. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet without Lily's cheerful chatter and tiny footsteps. Her absence made the small space feel vast and empty, like a church after service ends. The envelope was plain white, with Daddy written in wobbly letters on the front. He recognized Grace's neat handwriting underneath, providing his address. His throat tightened as he carefully broke the seal, trying not to tear what Lily had created. Inside, he found 3 pages of lined paper covered in the large, uneven letters of a child learning to write. Some words slanted upward, others downward, with occasional backward letters that made his heart ache with tenderness. Colorful flower stickers dotted the corners of each page. "Dear Daddy," the letter began. Ethan had to pause, taking a deep breath as emotions washed over him. He could almost hear Lily's voice in the words. "I don't like it here. Everything is too big and too fancy. My bed has these tall posts and weird curtains that make scary shadows at night. Grandma says I need to learn proper manners, but I think I have good manners already because you taught me to say please and thank you." Ethan's vision blurred as he read on. "They have a chef who makes fancy food I can't pronounce. I miss your pancakes, even when they're a little burnt. I miss how you cut them into hearts when I'm sad." The next paragraph was messier, as if Lily had been crying while writing. "Miss Grace helped me write this letter because some words are too big. She says it's okay to tell you how I feel. I feel scared, Daddy. I don't want to live in this big house with all these fancy things. I don't want their swimming pool or their movie theater room." Ethan's hands shook harder as he turned to the second page. "I want our tiny kitchen where we dance while doing dishes. I want our squeaky heater that sounds like it's singing. I want to sit on your lap in our old chair while you read me stories." Tears splashed onto the paper as he read the next lines. "Grandma says they can give me everything I need, but they're wrong. They can't give me you. They can't give me your hugs or the way you kiss my forehead when you think I'm sleeping. They can't give me the way you always know when I need to hold your hand." The third page bore the marks of several erased and rewritten attempts. "Remember in court when I said I kidnapped you? I meant it, Daddy. I don't want castles. I want you. I kidnapped you, Daddy. You're mine forever." Miss Grace says, "Love isn't about big houses or fancy things. It's about hearts that fit together. Our hearts fit together, Daddy. Please don't let them keep me." At the bottom of the page, Lily had drawn a picture of 2 stick figures holding hands. The taller one wore what looked like his old army jacket, and the smaller one had a big smile and pigtails. Above them, she'd written in bright red crayon, "My Daddy and me, together forever." Ethan pressed the letter to his chest, his tears flowing freely now. The paper crinkled against his heart as deep, racking sobs shook his body. He hadn't cried like this since the day he'd learned of his wrongful conviction, but these tears were different. They carried both crushing pain and fierce love. His eyes drifted to the empty chair where Lily usually sat for breakfast, her legs swinging as she chatted about her dreams from the night before. The silence felt like a physical weight pressing down on him. Their tiny apartment, which had finally started feeling like a real home, now echoed with absence. Looking around, he saw traces of Lily everywhere. Her crayon drawings still decorated the fridge, held up by mismatched magnets. Her small pink cup sat unwashed in the sink from their last morning together. Her stuffed elephant, forgotten in the rush, lay fallen behind the couch. Each item was a reminder of what he'd lost, what had been taken from them. But they were also reminders of what he was fighting for. This wasn't about proving himself to the courts or the grandparents anymore. This was about a little girl who needed her father, who chose him despite his flaws and struggles. Ethan carefully folded the letter and slipped it into his shirt pocket close to his heart. Standing up, he walked to the window where he and Lily used to watch the sunset together. The sky was growing dark now, and he wondered if she was watching it too, from behind the grand windows of her grandparents' mansion. "I'll fight until my last breath," he whispered to the empty room. his voice rough with emotion but filled with determination. Early morning sunlight filtered through the dusty windows of Ethan's apartment, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. He sat slumped at his kitchen table, dark circles under his eyes, betraying a sleepless night spent reading and rereading Lily's letter. The coffee in his mug had long since gone cold. 3 sharp knocks at the door startled him from his thoughts. Through the peephole, he recognized Grace Martinez's familiar face, her expression unusually animated. He opened the door, noting the thick manila folder tucked under her arm. "Ethan?" Grace said, slightly out of breath. "I've been up all night working on this. May I come in?" He stepped aside, gesturing toward the kitchen table. Grace's heels clicked against the floor as she walked, her usual professional composure tinged with excitement. She sat down and spread several documents across the table. "These just came through from my contacts at Veterans Affairs," she explained, sorting through papers with practiced efficiency. "And these," she tapped another stack, "are from the military archives. Ethan, they prove everything you told me about your service years." Ethan leaned forward, his heart beginning to race. The papers detailed his original case from 20 years ago. Witness statements, personnel records, and most importantly, internal memos that revealed the racial bias behind his charges. "See this?" Grace pointed to a highlighted section. "Your commanding officer wrote that he needed to make an example of you. And here," she flipped to another page, "3 other soldiers of color faced similar accusations under his command. All were later quietly dismissed, but the damage to their records was already done." Ethan's hands trembled as he read. "I never had access to these before," he said softly. "They buried it all so deep." "The system failed you," Grace said, her voice gentle but firm. "But now we have proof, real documented proof of the discrimination you faced." She pulled out more papers, character references from fellow veterans, commendations from before the incident, even a letter from a junior officer who had witnessed the bias firsthand but had been too afraid to speak up at the time. "With this evidence, we can petition to have your record expunged," Grace continued. "More importantly, we can show the judge that your past conviction wasn't about violence or poor character. It was about prejudice and injustice." Ethan stood up abruptly, walking to his refrigerator where Lily's letter hung. Her childish handwriting blurred as tears welled in his eyes. "Do you think it'll be enough?" Grace joined him, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "Combined with your current situation, the stable job you've maintained, the community support, the obvious love between you and Lily? Yes, I believe it will be." They spent the next hour organizing the documents, preparing their strategy. Grace explained how they would present each piece of evidence, building a clear picture of both past injustice and present worthiness. "Your veteran friends are still willing to testify," she reminded him. "And now we have concrete proof to back up their statements about your character." As they worked, Ethan felt strength returning to his shoulders. He thought of Lily's words, "I kidnapped you, Daddy. You're mine," and felt a surge of determination. His daughter had never given up on him. He wouldn't give up either. "When can we file these?" he asked, squaring his shoulders. "I'll submit everything to the court today," Grace replied, gathering the papers carefully. "We'll request an emergency hearing. The judge needs to see this evidence as soon as possible." Before leaving, Grace paused at the door. "Ethan, I've been a social worker for 15 years. I've seen countless custody cases. What you and Lily have, that pure love and trust, it's rare and precious. Keep holding on to that." After she left, Ethan returned to the refrigerator. He took down Lily's letter and the drawing she'd made of them holding hands. Carefully, he pinned them side by side at eye level where he could see them every time he walked into the kitchen. The crayon figures smiled back at him. Stick figure versions of himself and Lily, surrounded by wobbly hearts. Next to it, her letter spoke of love stronger than mansion walls and riches. Together, they were more than just paper and ink. They were his battle flag, his reason to keep fighting. Ethan touched each one gently, like a soldier touching his medals before battle. Then he straightened his back, squared his shoulders, and turned to call his veteran friends. It was time to prepare for the biggest fight of his life, the fight to bring his daughter home. The marble halls of the courthouse echoed with murmuring voices and hurried footsteps. Ethan Reynolds stood outside the courtroom doors, his hand instinctively touching the folded letter in his suit jacket pocket. The paper was worn soft from constant handling, Lily's childish handwriting etched not just on the page but in his heart. Grace Martinez appeared beside him, her arms full of manila folders. "Ready?" she asked, her dark eyes steady and reassuring. Ethan nodded, though his throat felt too tight to speak. The doors opened, and they entered the packed courtroom. Every wooden bench was filled with familiar faces, veterans from the community center, church members, even parents from Lily's school. At the front, Lily sat with her grandparents, wearing a frilly dress that seemed to swallow her small frame. When she saw Ethan, her face lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise. Court is now in session, the Honorable Judge William Harrison presiding." Judge Harrison settled into his chair, his glasses catching the fluorescent light. "This hearing will address new evidence in the custody case of Lily Reynolds. Miss Martinez, you may proceed." Grace approached the bench with confident steps. "Your Honor, we have uncovered documents that fundamentally change our understanding of Mr. Reynolds' past." She handed copies to the clerk. "These military records and witness statements prove that Mr. Reynolds' prior conviction was the result of racial discrimination during his service years." A rustling went through the gallery. Ethan watched the judge's face as he reviewed the papers, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. "Furthermore," Grace continued, "we have testimonies from Mr. Reynolds' commanding officer and fellow servicemen who were present during the incident." She gestured to a distinguished-looking man in uniform who stood. "Colonel James Bradford is here to testify about the systemic issues that led to Mr. Reynolds' wrongful conviction." Colonel Bradford's testimony was clear and damning. He described the climate of prejudice, the false accusations, and Ethan's exemplary service record. Private Reynolds was a victim of injustice, he concluded firmly. He deserved better from the country he served. Pastor Mike Williams spoke next, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "I've known Ethan Reynolds for years. He volunteers at our food bank even when he barely has enough for himself. That's the kind of man he is, always thinking of others first." One by one, community members stood to testify. Mrs. Chen from the apartment building described how Ethan helped her carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs every week. Tommy Garcia, a fellow veteran, told how Ethan had talked him through dark nights of PTSD. Lily's teacher spoke about the dramatic improvement in Lily's happiness and schoolwork since being reunited with her father. The grandparents sat rigid in their expensive clothes, their expressions slowly shifting from disdain to uncertainty. Their lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge waved him silent, clearly absorbed in the parade of character witnesses. Sarah Johnson, a mother from Lily's school, stood next. "I admit, I believed the rumors at first," she said, her voice shaking. "But then I saw Mr. Reynolds at the community center, teaching all our kids to play basketball. He stays late to help with homework. He brings snacks for children who can't afford them. That's not the actions of an unfit father, that's the actions of a man who understands what children really need." Ethan felt tears threatening but held them back. His hand touched Lily's letter again, drawing strength from her words. Finally, Mrs. Reynolds, Lily's grandmother, stirred. She whispered something to her husband, who frowned but nodded. To everyone's surprise, she stood. "Your Honor," she said, her cultured voice wavering slightly, we may have been hasty in our judgment." She looked at Ethan, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. "We wanted what was best for our granddaughter. We thought that meant privilege, private schools, material security. But watching Lily these past weeks," she paused, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "She's been so unhappy away from her father. All our wealth can't replace what she has with him." Mr. Reynolds stood beside his wife. "We were wrong," he admitted gruffly. "The child belongs with her father." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Lily bounced in her seat, her eyes shining with hope. Judge Harrison removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. The courtroom fell silent, holding its breath. He replaced his glasses and leaned forward, his voice soft, but carrying clearly through the hushed room. Based on the new evidence presented and the overwhelming testimony of this community, I find no reason to separate this child from her loving father. Custody is hereby awarded to Ethan Reynolds. The gallery erupted in applause and cheers. Lily broke free from her grandparents and ran straight into Ethan's arms. He caught her, lifting her high as tears finally spilled down his cheeks. The letter in his pocket crinkled between them. A promise kept, a future secured. "Daddy!" Lily's voice rang out across the courtroom. Her pink dress fluttered as she broke free from her grandmother's grip, darting past the wooden barrier that separated the gallery from the court floor. Her small feet barely touched the ground as she raced toward Ethan. Ethan dropped to his knees, arms wide open. His vision blurred with tears as Lily crashed into him, her thin arms wrapping around his neck so tight it almost hurt. But he didn't care. The pain was sweet, real, a reminder that this wasn't just another dream that would fade with morning light. "Baby girl," he whispered into her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo. His shoulders shook as tears streamed down his face. "I missed you so much." Camera flashes exploded around them like lightning, but neither father nor daughter noticed. Lily's small hands clutched the back of his worn suit jacket, her tears soaking his collar. "I knew you'd win, Daddy," she hiccuped between sobs. "I knew you wouldn't let them keep us apart." The judge's voice, usually stern and commanding, had softened to something gentle and warm. "In my 30 years on the bench," he said, "I've rarely witnessed such pure love between parent and child." He removed his glasses, cleaning them with a handkerchief before continuing. "Young Lily Reynolds has shown remarkable courage throughout these proceedings. Her unwavering faith in her father speaks volumes about Mr. Reynolds' character." Ethan lifted his face from Lily's shoulder, still holding her close. The courtroom had fallen silent, hanging on the judge's every word. "This case began with an extraordinary declaration from a 6-year-old girl," the judge continued, a slight smile touching his lips. "She claimed she had kidnapped her father. While legally impossible, I've come to understand the profound truth in those words. Love, especially the love of a child, has the power to capture our hearts and transform our lives." Grace Martinez sat at the counsel table, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Her case files lay forgotten as she watched father and daughter reunite. When Ethan caught her eye, she gave him a watery smile and a small nod. "I want to thank Miss Martinez," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. He stood slowly, lifting Lily with him. She wrapped her legs around his waist, refusing to let go. Without her belief in me, her dedication to uncovering the truth. He had to pause, swallowing hard. "I might have lost everything." Members of the veteran support group stood in the gallery, some in uniform, others in civilian clothes. They nodded in acknowledgement, pride evident in their stance. Pastor Williams, who had testified about Ethan's character and faith, wiped tears from his weathered cheeks. "And to everyone who stood by us," Ethan continued, looking at the familiar faces in the crowd, "who saw past the headlines and the accusations to the truth, who helped a broken man become whole again through their kindness and support." His voice cracked. "Thank you isn't enough, but it's all I have to give." Lily lifted her head from his shoulder, her face tear-stained but beaming. "Can we go home now, Daddy?" A ripple of gentle laughter swept through the courtroom. Even Lily's grandparents, standing near their expensive lawyer, showed signs of softening. Her grandmother dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, while her grandfather nodded slightly, as if finally accepting the truth before him. "Yes, sweetheart," Ethan said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We can go home." The judge banged his gavel one final time, not to call for order but to officially close the case. "Court is adjourned." As people began filing out of the courtroom, Grace approached Ethan and Lily. Without hesitation, Lily reached out one arm to include her in their hug, keeping the other firmly around her father's neck. "Thank you," Ethan whispered to Grace. "For everything." Grace squeezed them both tight, before stepping back. "Go on," she said, gesturing toward the door. "Your daughter wants to go home." Ethan shifted Lily in his arms. Want to ride on my shoulders?" Lily's face lit up. "Yes," she exclaimed, already scrambling higher. With practiced ease, Ethan lifted her onto his shoulders. Her small hands rested on top of his head, and he held her legs securely. Together, they walked through the courthouse doors and into the bright afternoon sunshine. The light streamed down around them, warm and golden. Lily spread her arms wide as if trying to hug the sky itself. "We did it, Daddy!" she called out, her voice ringing with joy. "We really did it!" Ethan's heart felt so full it might burst. The sunshine caught in Lily's hair, creating a halo effect that reminded him of angels. Her laughter, pure and free, echoed off the courthouse columns. After all the darkness, all the struggle, they had finally stepped into the light together. Ethan's tiny apartment had never felt more like heaven. The late afternoon sun streamed through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the worn carpet as Lily danced around the living room, her stuffed bunny clutched tight to her chest. She twirled and laughed, her dark curls bouncing with each movement. "I'm home! I'm really, really home." Her voice echoed off the walls, filling every corner with joy. Ethan stood by the doorway, watching his daughter's celebration with misty eyes. Her small purple suitcase lay open on the floor, clothes spilling out in a happy mess. He couldn't help but smile at how she'd already kicked off her shoes, leaving them scattered by the couch. "Easy there, sweetheart," he said, chuckling as she nearly bumped into the coffee table. "Let's get your things put away properly." "Can I put my clothes in your dresser?" Lily asked, skipping over to her suitcase. "The one with the wobbly drawer?" "Of course you can." Ethan knelt beside her, helping to gather the scattered clothing. "We'll fix that drawer too. Make it work just right." Together, they began sorting through her belongings. Lily chatted non-stop about each item, telling stories about which outfit she wore on which day at her grandparents' house. But Ethan noticed, she never once said she missed their mansion or their expensive things. "Look, Daddy." She pulled out the drawing she'd made him, the one of them holding hands. It was slightly crumpled now, but her smile was as bright as the day she'd drawn it. "I kept it with me every night." Ethan's throat tightened. "We'll hang it right next to the one on the fridge," he promised. A knock at the door made them both look up. Grace stood in the doorway, holding a paper bag and wearing a warm smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, stepping inside when Ethan waved her in. "I brought a little housewarming gift." "Grace!" Lily ran to hug the social worker's legs. "Look, I'm home forever now." "You sure are, sweetie." Grace ruffled Lily's hair, then held up the bag. "I thought maybe we could celebrate with some fresh bread and honey butter?" Ethan's eyes widened at the gesture. "You didn't have to. Let me do this," Grace insisted, making her way to the small kitchen. "Besides, I smell something good cooking already." "Daddy's making his special spaghetti," Lily announced proudly. "With extra sauce because that's how I like it." The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people, but somehow they made it work. Grace helped Ethan finish preparing the simple meal while Lily set the table with their mismatched plates and cups. The apartment filled with the warm aroma of tomato sauce and fresh bread. "This is better than any fancy restaurant," Lily declared as she twirled pasta around her fork. Red sauce dotted her chin, and Ethan, gentle, wiped it away with a napkin. Grace watched them with soft eyes. "You know, Ethan, there are some affordable housing programs we could look into. Maybe find something with an extra bedroom." "Oh, we don't need that," Lily interrupted, looking worried. "I love our home. It's perfect just like this." Ethan reached across the table to squeeze her small hand. "It's okay, baby girl. We're not going anywhere unless we both want to. But maybe someday, we might find a place where you can have your own room to decorate." Lily seemed to consider this, taking another big bite of spaghetti. "Only if it's close to the park," she finally decided. "And only if we can take all our memories with us." The 3 of them laughed together, sharing stories over their simple feast. Grace told funny tales from her work, carefully choosing the happy ones that made Lily giggle. Ethan shared memories from his military days that were appropriate for young ears, mostly involving his friends' clumsy moments during training. As the evening grew later, Grace helped them clean up, showing Lily how to properly dry dishes without dropping them. The little girl took her job very seriously, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she carefully wiped each plate. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly to Grace as Lily put away the last fork. "For everything." Grace smiled, gathering her purse. "Just doing my job," she replied, but they both knew it had been so much more than that. After Grace left, Ethan helped Lily get ready for bed. She insisted on wearing her favorite purple pajamas, the ones with tiny stars all over them. They were getting a bit small, but tonight wasn't the night to mention it. "Story time?" Lily asked hopefully, as Ethan tucked her into bed. The couch wasn't very wide, but she looked perfectly content, snuggling down under her worn butterfly blanket. "One story," Ethan agreed, settling beside the couch. "Then it's sleepy time for my girl." He read her favorite book about a brave little mouse who saved her family. Lily knew all the words by heart, mouthing them along with him until her eyes started to droop. As he closed the book, she reached out to touch his face. "I kidnapped you forever, Daddy," she whispered sleepily, a small smile playing on her lips. Ethan leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Yes, you did, baby girl," he whispered back. "Yes, you did." Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the small church, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Ethan Reynolds sat in the front row, his Sunday best pressed but worn, watching with misty eyes as Lily stood with the children's choir. Her yellow dress, a gift from Grace, sparkled in the morning light. Pastor Samuel Clark stood at his pulpit, his warm smile reaching every corner of the sanctuary. The church hadn't always been this full, but today familiar faces filled every pew. Ethan's veteran brothers occupied the row behind him, their presence steady and protective as always. When the children's choir began to sing "Amazing Grace," Lily's clear voice rose above the others. She didn't just sing, she beamed, her whole face lit up with joy. Ethan's heart swelled as he watched her, remembering those dark days when he thought he might lose her forever. Grace Martinez sat beside Ethan, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "She has the voice of an angel," she whispered. Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Just weeks ago, this moment would have seemed impossible. Now here they were, surrounded by love and acceptance, part of a community that had fought to keep them together. As the song ended, the congregation burst into applause. Lily's eyes found Ethan's, and she gave him a little wave that made several people chuckle. The other children in the choir nudged her playfully. She had become quite popular among them. After the service, people gathered in the church courtyard. The spring air was fresh and sweet, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. Ethan stood with Grace and Pastor Samuel, watching Lily play tag with her new friends. "I don't know how to thank you all," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "What you did for us." Pastor Samuel clasped his shoulder. "You don't need to thank us, son. You proved yourself every step of the way. We just made sure others could see what was already there." Still, Ethan persisted. "Without your testimony in court, without the community's support," he turned to Grace. "Without your dedication to finding the truth about my past." Grace shook her head, smiling. "You know what really won the case? It was Lily. That child's love for you moved mountains." A group of Ethan's veteran brothers approached, led by Mike, who walked with a slight limp but never let it slow him down. "Hey, Reynolds!" Mike called out. "You gonna join us for breakfast at the diner next Sunday?" "Count on it," Ethan replied, grateful for their continued friendship. These men had stood by him through the darkest times, never doubting his character even when his past threatened to destroy everything. "Daddy!" Lily's voice cut through the conversation as she ran up, breathless and laughing. "Come play with us!" She tugged at his hand, her eyes bright with excitement. "Excuse me," Ethan said to the adults, unable to resist his daughter's enthusiasm. "Duty calls." They watched as Lily pulled him toward the grassy area where other children played. The sight of the tough veteran playing tag with a bunch of giggling kids made several people smile. Ethan didn't care. He learned that true strength wasn't about maintaining a hard exterior, but about being there for those you love. "He's come so far," Pastor Samuel remarked to Grace. "Remember how guarded he was when he first started coming here?" Grace nodded. "Fear does that to a person. But love? Love breaks down walls. Out on the grass, Lily shrieked with delight as Ethan caught her, spinning her around. Other parents had joined in now, the impromptu game growing larger. No one looked at Ethan with suspicion anymore. The man who had once been viewed with distrust was now just another father playing with his child on a Sunday morning. The spring sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the earth below. Church members began to drift toward their cars, calling out goodbyes and plans for the week ahead. But Lily wasn't ready to leave yet. "One more time, Daddy," she begged, pointing upward. "Please?" Ethan pretended to consider it, though they both knew he would never refuse. "Well, I suppose, one more time." He gripped her securely and lifted her high into the air. Lily spread her arms wide, as if she could embrace the whole world. Her laughter rang out, pure and free, echoing across the church grounds. Several people stopped to watch, smiling at the sight. Looking up at his daughter silhouetted against the bright blue sky, Ethan felt a profound peace settle over him. This was what redemption felt like, not just being cleared of past charges, but being given a chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. This was home, not just the small apartment they shared, but this feeling of belonging, of being surrounded by people who believed in second chances and the power of love. As he lowered Lily back down, she wrapped her arms around his neck in a tight hug. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered in his ear. The remaining church members looked on with warm approval at the father and daughter, finally safe, happy, and together. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Reynolds, I hand-picked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.